Evan Stewart, the 40th ranked player in the nation, recently got some new information released on 24/7 Sports. And for those of you that have come to the channel, you'll know that this is one of my favorite players in the entire class. I think that this kid is a 5-star waiting to happen, and because of that, we really need to get into the new information revolving his top 6. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. And given the fact that 5 out of the 6 schools Evan Stewart listed are in the SEC, do you think it's inevitable that he is in the SEC for his college career? Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes and N for no, and then let me know what you're thinking on that. And if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification, because I do constant college football content, player reviews, film analysis, talk style videos like this, and I'm on my push to 5,000 subscribers in my first year, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and comment down below, because that really does help content creators get picked up by the YouTube algorithm. But with all that being said, let's talk Evan Stewart. And look, this is a guy that, for those of you that have seen my videos on him, I'm so high on him because he is easily, in my opinion, one of the smoothest receivers in this entire class, and this is a class filled with really good receivers. But it's hard to find his combination of speed, size, and then route running ability. This is a guy that is incredibly talented at any facet that you want to use him at, and because of that, he could play either slot, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1. The ability he has is going to be absolutely endless on a football field, and because of that, he is incredibly valuable. You could line him up anywhere, and he is an instant mismatch. But let's get into these top 6 and what he's thinking. And we'll start with Texas, because Evan Stewart once was a Texas Longhorn commit, and then he decommitted. He wants to go through with his recruiting process, and I completely understand that, and I've actually heard a lot of Texas fans really echoing that sentiment, which is awesome to see people behind a recruit the way I've seen a ton of Texas fans behind this kid. This is an incredibly talented individual, and I love how Texas is still going to go after him. What Texas has going for them is Steve Sarkisian and the new offensive system. It looks to be great. The thing that's holding Texas back is that Texas has not had a first-round wide receiver since Roy Williams, and that was a while ago. The other thing that's holding Texas back is the coach that he was probably the closest to in all of the nation was Jay Valai, who is now at Alabama. And that's not what you want, especially going after a wide receiver, because we're going to talk about why I think Alabama may be in a really good place right now. I don't know that they're ahead. I don't know that anybody is ahead because he wants to really go through with his visits. But there are some things he said that are really intriguing. So Texas is in a great position, but the thing I think that's going to matter the most for Texas in this process is how the offense is able to develop in year 1 under Sark. If Sark is able to come in there and really show that there is going to be a ton of life to this offense, and I have every reason to expect he will, but if he's really able to establish that it's undeniable, it's going to be very hard to not want to be a part of that. I always talk about that with OU, right? If you're an offensive guy that goes to OU, I completely understand it because that's one of the most exciting schemes in college football. I completely get it. It's a showcase. So with that in mind, like that still, if you're a Texas fan, you have to love where you're at with Evan Stewart because of Steve Sarkisian. Now, Georgia, a lot the same with Texas. This was an institution that Evan Stewart almost committed to. And out of every coach not named Jay Valai, probably the coach he has the second best relationship is Cortez Hankton. He really likes the prospect of being developed by him, and he thinks he can get him in a really polished way by the time the NFL draft comes along. What's more for the Georgia Bulldogs is he's expressed interest in playing in the SEC, which is, one, why there are so many SEC schools on here, and two, why I asked the question in the beginning. I think the other thing for Georgia that is a really big deal that we can't overlook is Evan Stewart not only is a masterclass on the football field, but he has got an incredible social media following, and he does a lot of his work collabing apparently in Atlanta, Georgia. And so that right there would be hard to say no to because Georgia's a great program and they've had some success in the wide receiver position. Look, make no mistake about it. The last wide receiver they had taken in the first round was 2011 and A.J. Green. Mecole Hardman was the second rounder who probably could have been a first rounder. I'll give Georgia fans that one, no doubt. So this is an institution that does have some pride when talking about the wide receiver position. LSU also finds themselves up here, and look, aside from Alabama, if we're going to be just talking about wide receivers being produced in the first round, LSU probably has the next closest. However, if we are going to say the last two wide receivers LSU had taken in the first round, you'd have to go from 2014 to 2020, right? And that's the best odds out of any team on this list not named Alabama for first-round wide receivers. So LSU does have an incredible history of developing wide receivers, and for any LSU fans watching, if you do argue to me that we had guys who should have been taken in the first who weren't, that's a fair point. You're not going to get much pushback from me because I actually do agree with you there. You've produced incredible wide receivers into the NFL, and because of that, it makes complete sense why you're here, and LSU is really starting to ramp up the recruitment process on Evan Stewart because this is a guy they really want to land. Evan Stewart has a connection to LSU through Nuss. Nussmeier was his quarterback last year on 7-on-7, and so LSU needs to be able to capitalize on that and their ability to develop wide receivers. The next institution we need to talk about is Florida. And look, Florida is having Dan Mullen come at Evan Stewart with everything he has. Evan Stewart has commented that he feels like Florida is in a great place offensively now. He likes their odds moving on into the future. And what's more, they kind of benefit from the same thing LSU does. Right now on Florida's recruiting prospect list, at least, is Nick Evers. And Nick Evers is important because that's Evan Stewart's quarterback right now on 7-on-7. It's those tiny relationships that could end up paying huge dividends for these programs. I think something else we need to be aware of is right now, Florida is the first official visit for Evan Stewart right now. That's the first one he has planned. He likes the area, so this is a real team that's a real threat in the process for Evan Stewart. A&M is also in this process, and for A&M, this is an institution that is a home school for him, much like Texas, so they always have that benefit. A&M has been recruiting the wide receiver position very well. They have recent success in the NFL draft with wide receivers, specifically in the first round with Mike Evans. I realize that was a few years ago, but it happened, right? And he's been incredible in the NFL. And not only that, he has friends on A&M's team right now, which makes A&M a very real threat for Evan Stewart. But now let's talk about Alabama. And Alabama, like I said when talking about Texas, is in a very good position right now to land Evan Stewart. And the reason is because he's talked about a few things being important to him, and one is development, being able to be developed into the best wide receiver he can. Well, throughout this video, you've heard me talking about when the last time an institution had their last first-round wide receiver. For Texas, we have to go back to 2004, I believe, or 2008. I believe it's 2004, though. For Georgia, we go back to 2011. The last first-round wide receiver for Florida was Percy Harvin, right, in 2009. In fact, if you want to say when the last time Florida had 4 first-rounders, you'd have to go from the years 2016 to 2020. Now, why am I bringing all these numbers up? Because in the last 2 years alone, Alabama has put out 4 first-round wide receivers. LSU has something to say, Georgia has something to say, and they've all produced very talented wide receivers. But if we're talking about the first round of the draft, it hasn't just been relegated to the past 2 years either. I mean, my goodness, you look at the Alabama wide receivers in the league right now, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Julio Jones. Then this year you have Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, and now you're about to add Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. There are a ton of dudes in the league. Guys like Robert Foster are currently in the league still. The Alabama Crimson Tide has been wide receiver U, and there's really not a way around that. That's why I brought up the last place each institution had a wide receiver drafted in the first round. Because even though every one of these institutions has been putting out great players, and they are great places, these institutions at the current capacity aren't putting out what Alabama is putting out as it pertains to wide receivers. Alabama's lapping the field, and it's not a shot at these places. It's a shot at all of college football because that's the reality of the situation. Mix into the fact when you've talked about being wanted to be developed, and a guy that Evan Stewart reminds me of is a bit like Devontae Smith. Very smooth, an incredibly sneaky good route runner to where if you watch him, you kind of get entrenched in how smooth he can run his routes that you don't really pick up the nuances in how he gets so wide open. And for a high schooler, he's got a very deep bag of tricks to be able to get open along with incredible blazing speed. So when you look at it, talking about wanting to be developed, opening the recruitment back up, wanting to play in the SEC, and then talking about how Alabama has been a factory to the NFL, not only for every position, but especially for wide receiver. It has become wide receiver U, and that doesn't look to stop. And then when you look at the Tide quarterbacks right now, you have Bryce Young there currently, and the Tide just picked up another 5-star quarterback mixed in with the #1 quarterback from the state of Texas the year before in Jalen Milroe. The battle for Evan Stewart is going to be awesome, and I'm certainly not saying that Alabama is in first place. In fact, right now, as I said earlier on in this video, I actually think it's completely up in the air. My only contention is if you're an Alabama fan, along with a lot of other programs right here, there's a lot of programs that need to feel good about where they are with Evan Stewart. But Alabama has to be very excited about he being so serious about them, because this is an incredibly talented kid. He's talked about wanting to be developed, and there might not be a better place in the nation that's developing wide receivers right now other than Alabama. But I can't wait to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments and let me know what you're thinking. Where do you think Evan Stewart ultimately goes? That's it. See ya.